During the Middle Ages in Europe, um, we've already mentioned on another day that Europe was backwards politically and socially and economically from many other places in the world, including Asia and Africa. And so there wasn't a lot of trade. Okay, the trade that did happened over land. There was the Silk Road. These kind of red roads here, red lines, were built by the Mongols, um, and what it did was it connected the Europe with the riches of the East. The problem that the Europeans had was that they really didn't have anything to trade. Okay, so there wasn't Europe didn't really have anything that the Asians wanted, and so the trade was minimal. Okay, and all what trade that there was happened over land. Okay, now at the same time, there was a lucrative trade between East Asia and the east coast of Africa that was accomplished by Muslim traders who were, traded over water. Okay, so there's a trading network here that's an ancient and lucrative trading network, but it's not connected to the Europeans because Europeans essentially don't have anything to trade. In the 1450s, the king of Portugal will uh, sponsor the discovery of a new technology that allows Europeans to sail away from land. Okay, so now one of the problems that Europeans had was that they couldn't sail out of sight of land because they would get lost. They didn't have compasses, they didn't have sextants, they didn't know where they were. And if you sailed away from land, you might not be able to find it again. Okay, and so they had to stay within sight of land. Okay, but with the invention of the compass and the sextant, it was possible to navigate by the stars, so you could go away from the land and you could still know where you were. Okay, and so what happens is then that Europeans start to venture out into the ocean, and they will eventually find a series of islands out here called the Azores, um, and the Canaries, right? And these islands, um, what will what will what will happen is that the Europeans will conquer these islands and enslave the people, right? Now, what's really interesting about that is that all the people in these islands are white, right? So what that means is that the Europeans' use of slavery didn't really have much to do with race at that time. It had more to do with, what could I use for labor to create profit, all right? And they used the white natives here, okay? But at any rate, the point is that as they continued to sail, they found their way around Africa, okay? And this is the Portuguese now I'm talking about. One of the things that drew them around Africa was this legend of a place that was so wealthy that the king was covered in gold, and that would be El Dorado, the golden one, right? Or the gold gilded one, I guess you could say. All right. So they believed that El Dorado was somewhere in East Africa, and so they kept exploring until eventually they found their way around the Cape and into the Indian Ocean. And once they got into the Indian Ocean, they discovered these trading routes that the Muslims had been operating for years. Okay, and the Portuguese had a technological advantage over the Muslims because the one of the technologies that the Portuguese had developed was brass cannon, right? So the Portuguese were literally able to blow their competition out of the water, and they established a carrying trade. It's kind of like an early modern um, UPS, right? They would get stuff in one place and they would take it to another place and they would trade what they had carried for something else, and then they would take that to someplace else, and they would continue trading, and then all of the money from that trade is going to eventually make its way back to Portugal. So Portugal will become really a wealthy trading nation. Okay, so now if we look then, if we at the time of La Reconquista in 1492, right? There's trade with Europe. Remember that, keeping in mind that Europe doesn't have much to trade. What the Portuguese are trading is their navigation technology, essentially, right? But there's trade with Europe. Some of the trade is overland, and that trade is dominated by the Italians, the Venetians, and the Genoese, right? And then there's trade over water, and that trade is dominated uh, by the Portuguese, right? And now we have uh, this appearance of uh, a new aggressive nation that wants to expand, but there really is no place for them to expand to. They can't expand um, into the overland trade, because the overland trade is controlled by the Italians, and they can't expand into the overwater trade because it's controlled by Portuguese.